Your parent is not refusing to sign the power of attorney because they don't trust you. I want you to hear that again. Because almost every adult child who has tried to have this conversation walks away thinking, my mother doesn't trust me. My father thinks I'm after his money. They would rather give it to a stranger than me. And then they go quiet. They stop bringing it up, they wait, and the situation gets worse. But that's not what's happening. As a psychiatrist who has sat with hundreds of aging parents and their adult children, I can tell you the resistance to power of attorney is almost never about trust. It's about something else entirely. And until you understand what is actually happening, you cannot have this conversation in a way that works. So today, I'm going to tell you what is really going on inside your parents' head. And I'm going to give you a different way to start the conversation that has a much higher chance of getting you what your family really needs. So welcome back to the Aging Parent Playbook. I'm Dr. Barbara Sparacino, triple board certified psychiatrist and the Aging Parent Coach. So today we are leaving family dynamics and stepping into pillar 1, legally ready. This is the pillar that, if I'm being honest, families neglect the most and pay for the most when they neglect it. Power of attorney is the document at the center of this. It's a legal authority that says one adult can act on behalf of another when that other adult cannot act for themselves. Without it, every other piece of caregiving becomes much harder. Doctors can't talk to you about your parents without it. Banks can't let you manage their money without it. Insurance companies will not work with you. Facilities will not take direction from you. The whole machinery of caregiving runs through this one document. And here is the truth most families don't face. Most parents do not sign one. Not because they refuse outright, but because the conversation somehow gets stuck somewhere between awkward and impossible. The adult child tries to bring it up. The parent gets quiet or defensive or changes the subject. And then the conversation ends. Until a crisis happens and there's no power of attorney and everyone scrambles. This is preventable. But only if you understand what's actually going on, right? So that's what we're going to do today. In part 1, we're going to talk about what adult children get wrong about this conversation. So let me describe what the conversation usually looks like. You decide it's time. Maybe your mother had a fall. Maybe your father got confused at the pharmacy. Maybe you read an article that scared you. So you sit your parent down, or you call them, and you say something like, Mom, we need to talk about power of attorney. I want to make sure I can help you when you need it. And your mother gets quiet. Or she changes the subject. Or she says, I don't want to think about it right now. Or she gets defensive and says, I'm fine. I don't need anyone to take over. So what do? You back off. You feel like you've offended her. You feel like she doesn't trust you. So you wait 6 months. You try again. Same result. So now you wait a year, right? You try again. Same result. Eventually, you stop trying and the document never gets signed. And here is where most adult children get this wrong. They think the resistance about them. They think their parent does not trust them or thinks they are greedy or is angry at them. They take it personally when, then they stop having the conversation because the rejection hurts too much, because the resistance is almost never about you. The resistance is about 3 things. None of them are about whether your mom trusts her daughter. So what? The conversation is making her think about her own death. That is the actual thing that's at stake, right? Power of attorney is a death and decline document. It says, when I cannot make my own decisions, you make them for me. Bringing it up forces your parent to imagine herself in a state of incapacity, to imagine herself not being herself anymore. And that is one of the most threatening thoughts a human being can have. So the brain does what brains do. It avoids, it deflects, it changes the subject. 2, the conversation feels like a loss of control, right? So aging is, in many ways, a long series of losses of control. Your parent has watched friends decline. They have watched their own body slow down. They have noticed they forget words. They are already, quietly maybe, terrified that they are losing themselves. Signing a power of attorney feels like another data point in that decline. It feels like saying out loud, I am not the person I used to be. Of course they resist. The resistance is not rational, it's existential, right? 3, the conversation often happens at the wrong time. Most adult children bring this up after something goes wrong, right? So after a fall, after a misplaced wallet, after a near miss in a car, after a scary doctor's visit, which means the parent is already feeling vulnerable, already feeling diminished, already feeling like the family is starting to talk about them like they are not in the room. And now you are also asking them for legal authority over the decisions? Look, the timing makes it feel like a power grab, even if it's not. And none of this has anything to do with whether your parent trusts you. It has to do with what the conversation actually requires them to face. Mortality, decline, loss of self. Those are the topics they are avoiding. You just happen to be the messenger. So now, part 2, the psychiatric frame on this conversation, right? So I want to give you the way I think about this clinically because it changes how you have the conversation. When I sit with an aging adult who is starting to need help and I ask them about end of life planning, almost every single one of them tells me some version of the same thing. They want to maintain control. They want to be respected. They want to be heard. They don't want to be a burden. They want to die with dignity. They want their children to remember them as the person they used to be, not the person they are becoming. And notice, none of them say, I don't trust my daughter. So when your parent resists this conversation, what they are really saying is one of those things. They are saying, I want to maintain control. They are saying, I don't want to think about being diminished. They are saying, I do not want this conversation to be the moment when I admit I am declining. And once you understand that, look, the conversation changes. Now you can stop trying to convince them to trust you because that was never the issue to begin with. You start having a conversation about what they want their future to look like. And a power of attorney becomes a tool for protecting that future, not a tool for taking control away. This is the reframe. Power of attorney is not about your parent giving up control. It's actually about your parent seizing control, and it's about making sure your parent's wishes are carried out when they cannot speak for themselves. Look, that's a completely different conversation. And it's one most parents will actually have with you if you frame it correctly. So in part three. Now, how to start the conversation. Here's what I want you to try. Instead of saying, Mom, we need to talk about power of attorney, try this. Mom, I've been thinking about something and I want your help with it. If something ever happened where you could not speak for yourself, even if it were just for a few days, like if you had a bad fall or if you were in surgery, who would you want making decisions for you? And how would they know what you wanted? Notice what's different. You are not asking her to sign a document. You are not asking her to admit she's declining. You are asking her what she wants, and you are centering her as the one in control, right? You are asking her to be the author of her own care. And most parents, when asked that, will engage, right? Because the question respects them. The question puts them at the helm. And from there, the conversation goes one of a few directions. She might say, well, I want you to make the decisions. That's the opening. You can say, okay, I want to make sure I can do that. There is a piece of paper that lets me. Can we figure out how to get that set up? Now, she also might say, I don't know. I haven't thought about it. That's also fine. You can say, yeah, that's what I want us to figure out together. There's no rush. Let's just start thinking about that. Or she might say, I don't want to talk about this. And that is a moment where, if you were to handle it right, you do not back off completely. You say, I hear you. And I don't want to make this a big conversation today. I just want to know that when you are ready, we will figure it out. Because I want to make sure your wishes are followed, not somebody else's. And that phrase, your wishes are followed, not somebody else's, is doing a lot of work. It tells your parent two things. One, the conversation is about her, not about you. And two, look, there are real stakes if you do not have it. Someone else, a doctor, a court, a hospital, will end up deciding. And that someone else will not actually know what she really wants. And most parents, sitting with that information, eventually come back to the conversation on their own. To be honest, sometimes it takes a few weeks. Sometimes it takes a few months. But they come back because they don't want a stranger making their decision. Nobody does. Part 4. What to do once they're willing. So let's say you've had the conversation and your parent is willing. What do you actually do? First, you need to get the right document. And look, not every power of attorney is the same. The most important word to look for is durable. A durable power of attorney stays in effect when your parent loses capacity. A general power of attorney ends automatically when they cannot make decisions, which is actually when you need it most, so it would defeat the purpose, right? And this is the single most common mistakes families make. They get a power of attorney drawn up that voids itself in the moment of a crisis when they need it, right? So make sure yours is a durable one. Second, decide between healthcare and financial. There are two main types, right? Healthcare power of attorney, which lets you make medical decisions, and a financial power of attorney, which lets you manage money, accounts, and property. Most families need both. Some families assign them to different people, right? And that's fine. Some people have better strengths than others, right? Just make sure both exist and that both are durable, right? Third, have your parent name a successor. If you are the primary agent, who is the backup? What happens if you cannot serve or if something happens to you? Most state forms have a place for a successor agent. Use it. Without a successor, you have a single point failure built into the document. Fourth, get it notarized and store it correctly. The power of attorney is only as good as the people who can find it in a crisis. Your parents should have a copy. You should have a copy. The successor should have a copy. The lawyer should have a copy. The primary care doctor's office should have a copy. Some hospitals will not accept a power of attorney that they don't have on file ahead of time. Plan for this. Fifth, revisit it every 5 years or after any major life change. Wills and power of attorneys are not one and done documents. They need to evolve, right? A divorce, a death in the family, a move to a new state, because these are state dependent, a major change in your parents' health. Any of these is a reason to revisit. Lots of families set the documents up, file them, and then never look at them again. Then the agent dies or the state changes the rules or the wording becomes invalid. So please, schedule a 5-year check-in at minimum. Better like yearly. That is a technical work. The conversation, look, is really the hardest part. Once you have the conversation, the document is straightforward. The lawyer charges you a few $100s and the paperwork takes an hour. The reason most families do not have it in place is not because the legal work is complicated. It's because the conversation never happens. So let me bring it home. Your parent is not refusing the power of attorney conversation because they don't trust you. They're refusing because the conversation forces them to face mortality, decline, and loss of autonomy, right? That is the actual barrier. The reframe is this. Power of attorney is not about your parent giving up control. It's about your parent making sure their wishes are carried out when they cannot speak for themselves. It's the ultimate kind of maintenance of control, right? The conversation starter is this. If something ever happened to you where you could not speak for yourself, Who would you want making decisions for you? And how would they know what you wanted? And the document itself needs to be durable, with healthcare and financial both covered, with a named successor, properly notarized and stored, and revisited every 5 years. This is the conversation that, if you have it, makes every other caregiving situation easier. And if you do not have it, makes everything harder. Today is a good day to start. So if this episode hit you and you are thinking, okay, I need to actually get this done in my family, I have something for you. It's called the 5 Legal Documents Every Aging Parent Needs. It's a free PDF I built that walks you through exactly which documents your family needs, what each one does, and what to ask the lawyer for, so you do not end up with the wrong version of any of them. This is a list I wish every adult child had before they tried to have these conversations. Because once you know what you actually need, the conversation gets a lot less abstract. To get it, comment the word legal on this episode on Instagram, TikTok, or Facebook, and we'll send it to you like right over, right? Or grab it directly in the show notes. Most families wait until a crisis to figure this out, and you don't have to be one of them. So, next week, I'm going to tell you what happens when you do everything right and your parents still will not sign. When the conversation has been had, the documents have been drafted, and they keep saying, not yet. We're going to talk about capacity, about time pressure, about the legal options that exist when your parent will not act, and the situation is getting worse. It is a conversation nobody wants to have, but the families that I have watched navigate this well had it in time, sometimes just in time. Until then, take care of yourself and please start the conversation.